welcome everyone to this second session of Educators Living in the Joy of Gratitude. We're delighted to have you here. We're delighted to have a tremendous response from people who are engaged actually in classroom work at this very moment and therefore hoping to view this recording shortly. As we begin this second session, I like to explain just a couple of things. The purpose behind this entire year of webinars is to literally create an opportunity for educators who have actually had experience inside of school systems sharing the principles with students and faculty, parents, and perhaps even community members. What I've learned in the 25 years that I have worked with school systems in beginning to help to integrate the principles inside of what we might respectfully call the education machine. It's oftentimes in smaller communities, one of the largest businesses or organizations in a community. And when we're talking about public education, we're talking about something that has a political reality to it. It has an academic university involvement in the form of teacher preparation. And it has a community, both that it has expectations for educators and the system, and the school system itself has obligations to serve the children and families and the larger community. And in the 2.5 decades that I've been just assisting school systems in thinking about bringing out the best in children, it has become incredibly clear that while we can individually learn and live from the principles, we can be well grounded, for example, in the best educational and resilience research. Those things that we individually offer do not necessarily change a school system for the long haul. And therefore, it's necessary that we aim to have people who are employed inside of those systems and have administrative and other responsibilities to be able to be so well grounded in the principles that they are embedded in the way they do their jobs, that are authorized and supervised and evaluated inside of that system. In the long run, it is people inside the system that are in charge of whether or not that system continues to move forward. And we know firsthand that in some cases, administrators change as often as every 3 years. That is not necessarily true in every system. But when we have turnover in the leadership of schools, we need to embed the DNA of the school system with the understanding that Christa is going to be talking about today. So with that, I would like you to meet Christa Campsall from Salt Spring. And Christa, it occurred to me yesterday when I was thinking about your path in learning the principles, that you may be one of the unique individuals in education who had the opportunity to begin learning the principles while you were learning to be an educator. And I find that striking because this is the first fall and winter that you are experiencing retirement.
Yes.
So it has been a part of your entire career as a teacher.
Yes.
And for some people in this webinar, it may be a few years, it may be a substantial number of years, but you've played some very special roles inside of your system. And so I think it's best if you simply introduce yourself to us it will be better than if I do that. What have you done, and what would you like to share with us at this point in your professional path?
Thank you, Kathy. First of all, I'd like to thank Brett for facilitating this, and Kathy, you for coming up with the idea and for your steadfast work in sharing this understanding about the principles, since you were first introduced so long ago to this by the late Dr. Roger Mills. And also, I'm just thrilled being on a wee island here, Salt Spring Island, off the west coast of Canada, and being connected with educators around the world. So it's a thrill. It's true what Kathy says, that I learned about the principles midstream in my university career. And so it's going to be a little bit of time travel. I won't do 40 years stream of consciousness reflections, but my story does start back 40 plus years ago. I was halfway through my undergraduate degree at the University of British Columbia when I was really wondering if I had chosen the correct career, because in one way I was successful and things were going fine. My skill set was good, but I found that I was quite disillusioned in that I couldn't reach those students who were considered at risk for whatever reason, whether they be having challenging behaviors or whether they were withdrawn or frozen in a sense. And so I was giving education one last chance, and then thought perhaps I'd switch. So I need to go to a little bit to connect this story. I'm going to go just very briefly to talking about Sydney Banks, who in 1973 had a profound experience. And he was the first to say that he wasn't looking for anything. He was an average working man, an average family man. He would say that he didn't even know there was anything to look for. But he had this profound experience that revealed these three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought to him. And with that, he had the realization that this knowledge would change the fields of psychology and psychiatry. And so he is really the first example of transformational change. And I know his friends, Ken and Elsie Spittle, really struggled at first with this change in him. And actually, people, if they're interested, there is a video called the Experience, part of Sydney Banks' Long Beach lectures, where he talks about the experience in depth. It's about 30 minutes long. So he had this transformational change and then began teaching those who were interested. And I know for Ken and Elsie struggled to see him change from an ordinary family man to a wise and powerful teacher. Well, I'm here to say I had the opposite struggle, in that I met him as a wise and wonderful teacher, and I really struggled thinking that he was anything but that. And so, but I do know that his experience happening to someone who was ordinary and wasn't looking is really, what it really signifies is hope for humanity, that this knowledge can come bursting forth into someone's consciousness and then be shared really so effectively around the world. Mm-hmm. Now, my friend Bob Campsall, who's now my husband, uh, he had some neighbors, Chip and Jan Chipman, and they had common ground in that they were all searching. You know, people back in the 70s, it was common. People were searching for more. What is the meaning to life, and so on. And then at one point, Chip changed, and Bob was, of course, very curious what's going on here. And Chip revealed that he had been listening to Sydney Banks, and he attributed listening to him with the change. And so Bob was very curious and went over to Salt Spring Island, which was nearby, and went to Sid's first public talk in the summer of 1975. And being a good friend, Bob came to Vancouver to see me, to tell me he'd found the secret to life. And I'm like, oh, really? Yeah, prove it. So anyway, he shared with me what I clearly remember. I mean, this is 40 years ago plus, but I clearly remember him saying how what he'd learned, what he'd heard. I mean, he said he'd heard many of the words before. They were familiar at Sid's talk, but the feeling was new and powerful, and that's what really captured Bob's heart. But anyway, he came, and what he shared with me was that thought creates reality and happiness comes from within. And the first part, Bob stuck around for a few days in the city, and we just philosophized. It was so intriguing to us. What does that mean? Thought creates reality. And I argued up and down, and we philosophized, and what are the implications, applications? What does this mean? And the second part that I heard about happiness coming from within, I think just really resonated with Bob and with me. We were both really interested in being happy. So anyway, Bob left town and did what he did, and I started my long-term practicum. And what happened in that practicum, which lasted, I can't remember, it was 8-12 weeks, something like that, where you're full-time in the classroom, you know, trying your craft. And what happened was, all of a sudden, without really any volition on my part, all of a sudden I became rather an expert in reaching the hard to reach. And it was commented on, and it was just really quite a joy for me to see that my heart's desire of reaching the unreachable, now I was. And if I look back, I would say what happened was that my mind was able to calm down, having a little bit of a clue about life now, a little better clue. And I was able to, with a clear, calm mind, I was able to access my own wisdom and intuition and be able to see and what to do and what to say, and was able to connect with these youth, and it was successful. So I really thought, yay, maybe I am on the right track, and I continued.
Can I ask you a question at this point? How old were the students you were doing your practicum with?
They were like 6th, 7th, 13, 14, 12 to 14, I would say, something like that.
And at that point, am I correct in understanding that the main theme that you were getting from Bob and from whatever encounters you had had learning with Sid at that point was that thought created your reality?
Yes.
And that when you first heard that, your response was a bit intellectual. You were philosophizing about it, trying to figure it out.
It was started with arguing.
It started with arguing. You were arguing against your future spouse.
To philosophizing. I'm sorry?
You were arguing with your future spouse, right?
That's correct.
Oh,
maybe our first fight. Yeah, arguing and then debating and then philosophizing, as it really just felt, even though I couldn't quite get it, it just, the word thought really, not even thought creates reality, but just something about that word thought. Oh, you know, it really, in essence, it calmed my intellect, is when I reflect back. That's what I feel happened.
yes.
The following spring, Bob invited me and a few other friends to go and listen to Sydney Banks at a nearby Gulf Island. And I was just thrilled to hear him speak, and felt that it really brought to life the highest teachings I had learned to that point. And at the end of the talk, as many people will at a public talk, I was kind of lining up to ask Sid a question. And I was really, while I was waiting, I was really crafting a very intellectual question to pose. And as I got closer, Sid's eye caught mine just for a few seconds, and the question just kind of vanished mid-creation, and it was replaced with this beautiful feeling. And so I'd have to say, you know, the talk today is about seeing beyond behavior to student success. And I think at that point, reflecting back, I think I saw past my own behavior of proving my intellect. And all of a sudden, I was really more intrigued and interested in wisdom being the priority for me. And what happened when I returned to school on the Monday, because I was still a full-on university student, was that my own studies became easier. I was able to understand what I was reading. I was able to write my papers with confidence. I was more willing and able to get my own work done. So that was a big thrill. And to me, perhaps it's a bit ironic what we take the focus off the intellect and put it on wisdom, yet the intellect is better off. The intellect being a servant, as Einstein would often say, you know, that the intuitive mind was the gift and the intellect was meant to be the servant. And I found that to be true in my own studies. So I did graduate and earned my teaching degree, and did a little bit of on-call work. And then we got married and had a family, and I managed to stay home for 12 years raising our two sons, which was just so much fun for me. I just loved it. And I have to say that with a little bit of understanding of the three principles, the unconditional love was really the foundation of raising our children. And there was a lot of joy and happiness. Certainly we had to deal with loss and separation and taxes like anyone else. But that foundation was really ever present and so strong. And so after about 12 years, I did go back to teaching, and I got my first full-time contract. And it was such a beautiful experience. I found that, well, here in our school act, there's something called in loco parentis, which means teacher in place of the parent. And so it is expected that teachers take on some of the functions and responsibilities of a parent. And I found that my relationship with these students was as deep and unconditional as it was with my own children. There was no difference. And I found I had no curriculum. I had really no set of terms or vocabulary. I just had my understanding, and it was really beautiful. We were we were quite a class. All the differences were, caused issues, and there were lots of nationalities. There were issues with poverty. There was lots of issues, and we were a little bit disjointed at the beginning. Anyway, there's one student in particular. He had the most needs. This child was adopted at birth, and then the parents divorced, and one parent took the child and then couldn't manage to meet the child's needs, and then he's in foster care after foster care, and his behavior was escalating and escalating. So by the time I met him, he was in a special needs foster care situation. And like I say, I really had no formula, program, anything. It was just a case of seeing this child with empathy and really praising him when I could and appreciating him for who he was. And he settled down. He started, his behavior settled down. He was on a learning path. When I had a meeting with his foster parents, they're like, something is going on at home. He's not fighting with us. It's very structured in a special needs foster care situation. There's quite a rigorous list of things you must do, that he would fight every step of the way. And now he was willing and able and quite cheerful, in fact. So that was really beautiful for me to see that change in a short time, in a very short time. And then one day he brought in a couple of photo albums, and he wanted to show me, and he wanted to go through all these photo albums with me back in the day when we had print pictures. And here's what's so beautiful. It was the first time I've ever seen someone rewrite their past. I mean, when I first met him, his past was horrendous for him, and he was fighting mad. And now he brings in these albums and all these people that were really only part of his family in a temporary way. He loved each of them, and he had some beautiful memories of each of these people who, as he saw it now, had helped him along the way. It was so beautiful. And I'll give him as an example, because that's the first time I saw that, but it's certainly not the last time I saw a child rewrite their own past without really intending to, or someone telling them to. It just happens. Now, as I said, we were a little bit disjointed, this little class I had of, I guess it was grade 5 to 7, so like 12-year-old to 14-year-old. But we really got it together, and we really had a good time. And it was just a loving environment, and something I still can picture in my mind, this boy who was so outrageous. And then I had girls who were extremely religious and very conservative. One day I saw the boy and the girl side by side at the computer, having a little laugh about something, sharing common ground. And I thought, well, that's beautiful. It was just a symbol of how truth leveled all of us out. So, and then to our delight, I mean, we were part of a big city district. I wasn't on Salt Spring at the time. And our little our little class won the sportsmanship award for the basketball season for the city. So we're like, whoa. It was just another symbol of how unified and loving we had become. Just to finish.
Just one question. Were you the only teacher in that building that had an understanding of the principles?
Yes.
So
yes.
You were doing all of this from your own understanding, and you really didn't have curriculum,
No.
but it was in a sense, a huge shift in how you were seeing and relating to students and encouraging them in a natural way. Is that relatively accurate?
That is accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The, uh, Now, at the end of this school year, I find this really beautiful. Again, this is an example. It was my first example, but you see it again and again. Is I got a beautiful card and letter from a girl who was, I would say, the most, when I met the whole gang, she was probably the most stable person in the class. She had a fine upbringing. She really had no issues. She was intellectually capable. She was interested in learning and doing her best. And at the end of the year, her letter to me was about how she appreciated, of course, learning the math and science. But what she really appreciated was the modeling, as she called it, just learning from me how to be with people who are struggling. And she was so grateful that she learned patience. I mean, she's just a young woman, but she with all these beautiful words, she had learned patience and appreciation and really saw how to bring out the best in people. It was wonderful. About this experience, I want to say, I mean, there must be millions upon millions of classroom teachers in the world. I don't know how many. There's no fanfare. There are no grants. There's no special funding. There are no special projects. There's, no press with a spotlight on us. There's none of that. It's quite humbling. You are part of one of millions. But I will say that we are empowered as teachers to create something so it's ordinary, but we're empowered to create something that's extraordinary, where it's such an amazing feeling in that classroom. There is no place on earth any of us would rather be. And it's warm and welcoming, and we're learning and we're having fun. And so it's, on the one hand, it's so ordinary and there's no fanfare. On the other hand, I think this is where really humanity can move forward, is when there's that unconditional regard in a classroom and the acceptance for where these children are at and seeing them move further. I came across one of Sid's quotes that I want to just read, which I think kind of speaks to my experience. When our channel to the soul is open, we live in a more harmonious reality. Such a state involves no effort and nothing we have to do. We simply go about our everyday business of living, our actions stemming from compassion, love, and wisdom.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
And if this sidetracks you, please say so. In what you just read, you're talking about the connection to the soul. And you described a change in yourself that was surprising to you, and it was not coming from the intellectual processes you were trying to go through. When you think about school systems and the inner life of the child, how do you, in a sense, honor the necessity to connect with the soul of the child, the inner life? Parker Paul calls
Yes.
it the inner landscape,
Yes.
and the public reality of being in education. How did you navigate that over the years?
Well, I think it really solidified for me after I became a parent. And it's part of being an adult with a child. It's just part of my function and responsibility. If I have a bit of a clue about life, it would be wise for me to share it. And my school system expects that of me. And if the goal, of course, is intellectual development, but the research shows very clearly that if we want the highest intellectual achievement, we have to honor the whole person. And there's research coming out again and again that proves that. So I think but you know, there's nothing for me to kind of, you know, be promoting or, it's very quiet work. It's very quiet work. Yeah. Even to say to a colleague, oh, this child is doing this when they had that child last year and who was struggling, it's just very quiet.
Yes.
And in that, people see the results, and I'm not, I don't belong to any particular thing. There's nothing people have to get over. It's just me, garden variety teacher, and they see the results. Who's not happy about that? Yeah. Living in a joy of gratitude. The administrators are thrilled.
In one way, it sounds to me like, you know, the roadmap is really quite simple. Learn this and live it for yourself, and recognize a good feeling.
Yes.
You know, trust what that is. Don't get very intellectual and busy about it. But as you move forward, your state of mind welcomes the child and sees that same health and capacity on the inner part of the child. And it's all just there. I love the way you described it. Are you ready for some questions from people, or is there something more you would like to address first?
I'm going to talk next about a curriculum that was created that I did co-author, yes. And then I'll move into special education. Mm-hmm. And I have a few kind of case studies, maybe some student profiles that I thought might be helpful. So
excellent. Go ahead.
Either way, we could. I could go on, or if there are questions now, that would be fine. But I'm happy to go on.
Let's have you go on, but I encourage participants to use the raise hand function when you are ready to want to ask a question. But that will be at the lower and bottom bar of your screen. You'll see how to do that. So, Christa, please proceed.
The second part I think is really interesting is in the early 90s, I was introduced to a fellow, the late Jeffrey Tim in Florida. And he was given a grant to write a curriculum for students in Florida. And when we met, I had, of course, my 2 bits worth, and he was very happy to collaborate with me. And then in the end, we co-authored a curriculum on innate self-esteem. And he came to, Jeffrey Tim came to Vancouver, and we did a little bit of an introduction to these materials in the city. And by this time now, we had just moved back to Salt Spring Island. So we did this training in the city, and one of the attendees was a teacher from Salt Spring. So that fall, this teacher, Dr. Ralph, he was the head of special education at the time at our high school. He was quite inspired by the training, and he had the little curriculum there. And what he orchestrated was, he said to all the high school teachers, if you just give me all the names of anybody who's struggling for any reason. And he got so many names that we, in fact, created 2 classes, 2 innate self-esteem classes. and I became a volunteer. It was about late November when, by the time he had it all organized and set up, and we worked right through to the end of June with these two groups. We created family groupings, so it was students grades 9 to 12, and I'm just seeing the cute puppy. Grades 9 to 12, and then at the very first, and it was wild, let me tell you. So at the very first, Dr. Ralph was like, "Oh my gosh, what have I done?" Because I mean, we had it all: the belligerence, the acting out, the falling asleep, the late, the not. I mean, it just, we had the gang's all here, and I was. For whatever reason, not concerned about this. I just, I said to him, "It's going to be fine. It'll be just fine. Let's just look for small changes." And the first small change was a kid a boy who really couldn't have been bothered with any of the reading, writing, whatever that we were doing. And then one day he's like, "Give me a pencil." So I gave him a pencil, didn't comment on his lateness or rudeness or anything. But in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, he wants to participate. This is fabulous. And so I was always looking for just a little shift, you know. They think they're kind of giving me a hard time. Inside, I'm delighted. But for whatever reason, I don't even know why this videographer showed up in our classroom. He was doing videos around the school, and we were just like 2 weeks into our program. And I remember thinking, wow, we look pretty ordinary. We were, by 2 weeks in, we were a very civilized group, just doing our thing, just having a good time. And I have to say, Dr. Ralph was really quite rigorous. And although the kids coming in, like I said, were non-participatory. Either they were acting out or falling asleep or late or not attend, whatever it was, we saw it all, I think. By the end, by June, he had a very lengthy, I still remember it was on legal paper and several pages, very lengthy, rigorous written exam. And these students just, I still have those somewhere in a memory box. It was amazing what those students had learned and taken to heart. It was unbelievable to me. And just to show how this understanding just gets better and better. It's not something that wears off. It just gets better and better. As people connect with their own wisdom, we have to trust that their wisdom will keep unfolding. They don't need me. Once I've connected them to themselves, I mean, sure, it's nice for us to see each other, but they don't need me. They have themselves. And an example of this is there are these two grade 9 girls. Of course, I got to know everybody very well, and they really struggled with school and society and so on. And just before I'm ready to retire, who needs to meet with me individually are these two. Now these two girls are mothers of grade 9 girls coming in, and they're coming to meet with me to advocate for their grade 9 girls and just make sure the transition is smooth. And, you know, it was like long lost nieces. The feeling was still so strong to see them, but it was just a beautiful example of there they were struggling and they found something within themselves. And now this is 25 years later, and they're such tremendous loving advocates for their own girls. It was really touching for me to see.
So you are saying the girls that you taught in ninth grade,
yes,
aged, had their own children that came into the school system, and they were there to advocate for a relatively similar experience for their daughters.
Well, their daughters were doing fine. Yeah.
They were doing fine.
They were doing fine. They just needed they just wanted to make sure that, you know, when you go from a junior school to the high school, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Just wanting to make sure the transition was there.
So one outcome that I hear you saying rather offhandedly is that what we might typically see school systems categorize as high-risk young girls, ninth grade,
Yes,
on to parent well,
yes,
and their children have done well academically and socially in school.
yes,
Now,
yes,
let me make the connection, because Emmy Werner writes about exactly that kind of demonstrated natural resilience being possible.
yes,
But she did not have the luxury of being able to also spell out exactly how we can begin to tap that in individuals. So in a sense, her scientific study for 45 years
yes, I
and
know it.
your experience fit beautifully together, because you're saying if the state of mind of the teacher is in fact grounded in understanding the principles, living the principles, that a natural outcome is that you are fostering the well-being of the students for a lifetime.
Yes. Once you find, it's the same was true for me. Once I found a little something inside myself, instead of where's the answer, looking out, and you start to look in, you never, I don't, moods, whatever is irrelevant. You never lose that connection once it starts to unfold.
It's more powerful than anything else. That connection keeps us
Yes. Yes.
tethered on the path to well-being.
And
At
I want to say the truth is such a great leveler. Those who were asleep woke up. Those who were belligerent calmed down. It's just quite amazing how everybody gets what they need
Mhm, mhm.
to help themselves be whole.
Did you find it helpful to actually have a curriculum, a plan that you and Jeff were using with this group of students? Clearly, the first requirement was your own understanding and state of mind, but was the curriculum an important secondary factor?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it became a bit of a thing here to exclude students, and that way you kept the mainstream a little calmer. And there were all these programs created where they would take these troubled youth and separate them. And it was, I mean, I could cry. It was so sad. It was just horrible. It was horrible for the teacher. It was horrible for the youth. You were labeled in some negative fashion, and it was just like almost like a hellhole at times. It was almost an impossible situation that these teachers were put in. Okay, so now Dr. Ralph and I are inviting this upon ourselves. He created it out of nothing. Without the understanding, without having some of those three principles to share, ours would have stayed a hellhole too.
Yes.
To connect, first of all, my feeling of unconditional regard, my deep caring, is the kind of the door opener, and then to give them some knowledge about how life works, so they have a clue of how to help themselves.
Yes.
So I think it's both. If you're going to have a segregated situation, I would definitely want to be armed with some valuable truth to share, so they can move to their wholeness.
I think we're at a great point to encourage participants to pose a question or offer a comment. And I actually can see all of you. So it's very easy for me to say, if it's all right, I would unmute so-and-so and ask you to speak, but perhaps one of you might like to indicate that you do have a question or a comment before I begin flying over and inviting you to come forth. All you need to do is raise your hand in that lower area. And I think Dave Decker, if I can put you on the spot. See his eyes light up.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes.
You're very welcome. Would you just make a comment about the work that you do, and then perhaps just respond to Christa, because you are a seasoned and experienced teacher, and I could see the lights going on as you were listening to Christa. What were you thinking about?
Well, she had so many good points, and some of the things, like one of them that I really, really loved was it's not something that wears off. It just gets better and better. And to me, that just kind of sums up my experience with it. You know, starting off from a conversation with my wife when we were dating to where we are now presenting. I mean, we presented last night to a mentor-mentee meeting, and, you know, I've done some advanced resiliency stuff and how we work with kids and the great job Carrie does with them. And it does get better and better. It's amazing. It really is truly amazing.
Thank you very much. I will mute you again. And I am tending to think of another person to light on, but please volunteer if you wish. I can also see if you just flick your hand, I can actually see it. And I'm wondering, Marita, would you be willing to make a comment, perhaps? May I unmute you? You're on, my dear.
Oh, hi.
Yes. Tell us where you're from and what you might be responding to with Christa.
Well, I work in Sweden, and I work with preschool kindergarten kids. But I can say it's about the same thing, really. You don't seem to do much, but you get a very great response without doing so much. Just being there, seeing through all the tantrums. And at the moment, I work in a group where a lot of 3-year-olds, and you know, 3-year-olds, they do have tantrums. And it's nice to see that it doesn't bother me as much nowadays as it used to. And just staying there, seeing through these tantrums and seeing through the screams and sometimes, you know, bad behavior, and just being there makes those times seem much nicer for the kids. They calm down much quicker. And yeah, so even though it's small kids, it's about the same.
Yes.
One thing, that you get that connection, seeing what they are behind all the screens and sort of bad behavior, even though they're small kids.
Yes.
Are there others in Sweden who might be doing a little bit in the preschools that you're aware of with the principals?
No, because the 3 principals are growing in Sweden, but as far as I know, there's mostly coaches or people outside the school system at the moment. But I hope that we'll make it grow, because I know that people have tried to come into the system and talk to school teachers, but without being a teacher yourself, it's quite hard to get the people to listen and get them to spend time with you or give you the opportunity to talk to them. So it's easy when you're already in there and they know you as a teacher.
You know, I think of one preschool story from years ago, and there was, actually it's early childhood. The dad was a staff person in that program, and he had a 3-year-old child. He took the child to daycare on his way to work each morning. And Ron had been incredibly committed to beginning to teach the understanding to his very young child. And it's always so nice because children and parents can find their own language for this. And they had settled on, don't get stuck in the muck. as a way of talking about being in a secure state of mind, if you will. And on a particular morning, the dad was rushing around the house to get everybody into the car and off to their various drop-off points. And the little 3-year-old came up and latched onto his leg and just said, "Daddy, you're stuck in the muck." And I think the power of the simplicity of the understanding is something to be kept in mind, because when we talk about the spread through systems, we want this kind of understanding to be embedded as early as possible. And it's like a lot of other things we teach. It has a common language. And when parents and children and the educators in the system actually learn it, we go far. And I see that Sue, our special discussant, has her hand up. I'm going to move to you. And I first need to mute you, Marita. And I'm going to Sue, if that's all right with you. Takes me a minute to locate you. Thank you, Sue, for being patient.
It's fine. So thank you for the opportunity. Listening to Christa kind of just, it's exciting. It's calming and it's exciting, because we could have taught in the same classroom or the same school, and yet we're a school system apart. We have different language. We have so many differences on the surface, and yet, we've met the same children.
Yes.
And we've met the same parents, and dare I say, we've had those moments of connection that there are no words to describe. So I think that's wonderful. And you talked about the leveling, and that's what I see, because my story is different to yours in terms of how I ended up working with special educational needs and challenging behaviours, call it what you will. I was a teacher in mainstream. So similarity was that I was always interested in the ones that were not conforming, always interested in those unhappy, angry, difficult, challenging kids. And in a mainstream, when you've got 32 in a class, there didn't seem to be much opportunity to find the time to work with those individuals beyond managing their behaviours. And when an opportunity came up to leave mainstream and enter, it was a system in the county that I live in that catered for children who were close to being excluded permanently, which means that they were out of the school system or at risk. And I jumped at it. And despite the warnings of, if you leave mainstream, you'll never come back and you'll never be able to get back. It's sort of a poor cousin. And I thought, fine by me. This is where I feel I want to go. And I wouldn't say that it was a bed of roses. I wouldn't say that every day was a sparkling result. There were there were times when there was nothing you could do, and there was a situation that was beyond your control. But one of the things that occurs to me is that when you're a teacher in that kind of setting, or even in mainstream, because it's challenging in its way with the workload and the standards you have to reach, is that you kind of stay fresher and your heart stays more relaxed. And for me, I was looking for a written answer. I was looking for, now I'm here. I know I see beyond behaviours. That was just obvious to me. That wasn't who these people were, these young people. But now, where are the words I can say to them so that they know that? So that was, in a way, that continued my journey, and how I came across principles was, now I found it. And then I thought it was all in the words. So I battled for a long time with the idea that, there's something beyond the words. There's something more magical and powerful that's in a connection. And I didn't trust that. So for quite some time, I was using a lot of words, and I was quite busy. And so when you were talking about, again, going back to that leveling, what happened for me personally was my guide. I could only I could only lead into areas that I had already discovered for myself. And that's like a double joy, because not only are you finding this this new world to live with, new eyes and new ears for the world and new relationships, you then can share that, sometimes clumsily, sometimes with too many words, but you have something else to share that seems to me to be a vital component to education. It has to be the thing that we can't not have in education for us to fulfill all the education demands of us as teachers, well, and as parents and as pupils. And the joy to know that this isn't difficult. This is simple. This is what we already have, and this is what we can share. And we can be gracious enough to know that, well, we'll just share what we understand ourselves. There's only a forward direction. There's only gains to be made in, well, we're talking about the whole child, we're talking about the whole teacher, we're talking about the whole system. And just listening to you, and I thought, wow, yeah. Sometimes it's felt lonely in the past. It's sort of, Marita says, well, she's not aware of anyone else in Sweden doing the work she does. So you're not meeting up in the staff room or having coffee with somebody who's going, yeah, it's just amazing, isn't it? Did you see how so-and-so responded? And all I did was sit quietly. I just sat in the feeling. And sometimes I think, and this is, I guess, what's called this forward, that here we all are, and it doesn't matter where we are. We're universally the same.
Beautiful.
So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue. And Christa, I will ask you if you choose to respond to the wonderful things she's just said. But Sue, would you just tell us very briefly, who was the person that you learned about the principles from the very first time?
Dr. Roger Mills.
Okay, so you and I have that in common. And you talked about, as did Christa, how we all tried to intellectually understand this, and we eventually moved to a point where we made sense out of some words that we could use to pass things on. But there was something much deeper that over time started dawning on us. I find that interesting because in some ways it doesn't matter what teacher one was learning from. Perhaps we have a bit of a habit to approach everything, perhaps in the educational setting especially, from that intellectual perspective. And when we can break free of that and still work within the confines and expectations of the system, then we get somewhere. Thank you. Christa, do you have a response or comment for Sue?
A couple of, I have a comment and then for Sue, and then I want to make a point. I love what Sue said about, the whole teacher and how really it's very wise for us to look after ourselves. And I'm not talking bubble baths and, music. I mean, just between our own ears, what is going on in our own ears? What thoughts are we choosing to pay attention to? How are we nourishing our own soul, and how are we taking care of ourselves spiritually, so that we can each day be brand new with these children? It is a big deal, like you say, Sue, when you have being a classroom teacher, and I would have the room is packed. They weren't really designed for 35 kids, but you have 35 kids and you have all these levels, and you're on your own, so that you really, as Sue is saying, you don't have a ton of time to really do the one-to-one. You do the best you can when you can, kind of thing. But I think the point Sue made about the whole teacher is very, very important. If we're depleted, then it's how do we see with loving eyes? We would more tend to see the negative rather than the positive. We really have to. It was really a job in self-care, in a sense. which is wonderful. Who doesn't want to grow and learn? My other point is, the point I want to make is, once a child changes a trajectory onto a healthy path, once they have that connection with themselves and see themselves as whole, let's get to work. Like immediately the focus becomes, let's earn our grades, let's get onto the next level, let's learn our skills. This is all very important, that each child ends up, each youth ends up on that grad stage with the skills and the learning required to get them to the next level so they can be independent. It's really remarkable how that change in direction from the world is out to get me to, oh, there's something powerful inside of me. With it comes a momentum for learning. Let's take advantage of that. Of course, you guide them along the way, but they're ready. They're ready with some courage to face their weaknesses. They're ready to skill build. They're ready to reveal to you where they're at academically, so you can help them go further. It really, once a child is past the point of suffering, you can really just let's go for it, and you're into the joy of learning and achieving. That's the point I wanted to make.
Okay. So do you have a response?
Well, in so many ways, what I was looking for ended up being a side effect. You know, you just talk about a child hears something new and it sets them free. So the side effect is they're free to do something new. So the whole thing is a very positive momentum, as you describe. And you're talking about this, it's like kids are popping up in my head. I remember, I think people, youngsters that I haven't had contact with for up to even 10 years. But like yourself, I have two young women who I still, I call myself my young friends, rather than I'm their mentor. And it's extraordinary. One of the things, just to add briefly, is in all the time that I didn't see this before. This is something that I've seen more recently. Is all the time that I would work with young people like this, I wasn't so aware of all the learning that I was doing and the teaching that I was having from them once I was open to it. And just one example was a young woman who, she just wasn't conforming to the plan that I had for her. And it was a heartfelt plan, and I wanted her to have a better life. I wanted her not to have these angry relationships and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't see that was just a new story, because it looked like a better story. I didn't see that was still just my story. And it came clear as a bell in a conversation with her, where I wasn't in that feeling that I'd come to know so well. I was in the, well, I can't understand why you behave like this. And I thought, oh, stop this conversation, because the thing that's most precious is in danger. And the preciousness was the connection I had with her through ups and downs and thick and thin. And that was so much more important than any words that were going to come out of my mouth. So I can't say that I stopped it in that moment, but it stopped a lot shorter than it would have done. And then I apologized to her the next day, and I just said, thank you. You were patient with me when I was going into my parent-teacher kind of story. And she was just great. She just laughed. She said, oh, I know you. It's fine.
Sweet.
Yeah, it was just lovely. It's not one way. It's never one way. It's never just teacher to pupil.
Yeah, exactly. And they love when we ask for forgiveness. I like
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, they can be youth can be extremely gracious in that regard.
Oh, hugely.
Yeah.
I'd like to invite Marika to join the conversation. Your hand was up a bit ago, so I will unmute you, and feel free to respond to any of what you've been hearing.
Thank you. I love what I've been hearing, and I've seen Christa in action, and I just wanted to start by saying when she works with another human being, she is so compassionate and so caring that feeling immediately connects with another adult, a staff member, a student. that really is in the forefront of getting connected to your own if somebody else sees it in you. And I just wanted to say I love seeing that example. And in my own, like, she's been a mentor and a friend to me for about 40 years as well. We've been learning this together, and watching her raising her children, it's the same thing. And I value education so much. I love, I've worked in the system in many roles for many, many years. And the place I see to start is that connection. Sue talked about that too. Like, the learning can truly begin when we have that feeling with the students. And, in my life and all the different roles I've played with the students, that's where it's at for me, is finding that feeling where you're on the same page, regardless of what the issue is. Whether it's just a connection in the eyes, they feel safe, the learning is ready to begin. And I also love the learning from each other, learning from the students. It is challenging being an educator, and, the things that we have to carry and face every day. And often we're tired because we've had a little bit too much on our plates. And something that comes to mind for me is, if I come in and I'm just not feeling my best, I again connect with the students. And sometimes I see a spark there in front of me that just lifts me, and it reminds me of that place in myself too. So I love that two-way learning, right? Because it's in all of us. And to find that connection is so key.
I know at a workshop we did, Marika and Bob were our special guests in the afternoon, and Marika talked about a student who said she was just so pleased that when she worked with Marika, Marika's eyes lit up because she was in the presence of this girl, and that just meant the world to this girl. That just opened the door to her finding her own self, that, oh, someone sees me as worthy and dignified. It's almost like they have permission then to see it in themselves. It's really beautiful. Thank you, Marika.
I'm going to try something here. Amy Chin Mills Naeem is on the call, not visible to us, but I will unmute you, Amy, if you are available. And if so, simply chime in. And other than that, if you're not able to, we're glad that you're here. I'll leave you unmuted for a bit of time. And Christa, if you have something more you might like to add before, I see you, Amy. We will go over there. Can you hear us?
I feel like the student at the back of the class that was hoping not to get called on.
Oh no, that's me too.
And you've done such wonderful things in education. We just like to have you respond to what you're hearing today, if you're comfortable.
I joined on really as a student, of this series, because I have gone into many schools and worked with teachers, but to hear teachers who work in the schools consistently as teachers is something that I really felt I could learn from in some way. I mean, I'm not doing that. I'm doing more training of teachers or training of other people. But just to hear from, such beautiful people and who've been working in the schools for so long with such a wonderful feeling, I just want to listen and support that really at this time. If I think of anything that might be brilliant, I'll let you know, but I'm doubtful.
Well, I'm reminded of Amy's stories about teaching in the juvenile detention and corrections programs for youth. And I think it would be a test for all of us. So she's pioneered in some areas that undoubtedly are amazing. Thank you for being part of the series, and we'll honor you as a student. But feel free to comment along the way here. And in a sense, that makes a significant point. In this series, everyone is welcome to participate, and we're fully aware that not everyone has been employed in a school system, but we love having the diversity of presentation and involvement. So please feel free, regardless of what you've done, to participate in this discussion. And I'm wondering if there's someone online who might have a comment or question at this point. We have a short period of time yet for this discussion. And
if not,
I do see Naomi, and I will unmute you because I think your hand may have been up a bit.
Yes, it was.
Thank you so much. Would you offer your comment?
Yeah, I just thought you just mentioned that that some people here are not teachers in schools, and I thought, oh, you're talking about me. So I thought I would just say hello. I'm a home educator, and I've been home educating my 4 children for the last 16 years.
Yeah.
My oldest is now 22 and my youngest is 13. So, and I first met with the principals about 1.5 years ago. So the principals themselves are very new to me, but I do know that in the way that I've home educated, it was very principally, without realizing it. Yeah. I keep seeing that I've done it in a way which is congruent with the principles.
Beautiful.
So I just wanted to say, I'm not here as a teacher. I was a teacher a very long time ago.
Yes.
But sorry?
You are a teacher with your own children. That would be hard for me. So I'm glad you're here.
I don't like to think of myself as a teacher. That's not how we do it.
No.
Okay. So, it's about them, well, all of us learning and growing. It's not about me transmitting.
Right.
Teaching is often about. So.
Fabulous.
Thank you so much. We look forward to your continuing comments because it expands all of our field a great deal. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have another person that might be interested in speaking up? Martin, I'm wondering if there's something you might be interested in responding with. May I unmute you?
Oh, hi. I'm just really grateful to be part of this series. What I love about it is talking about getting beyond the intellect to working with the feeling. My job for the last 5 years has been working with kids who have been removed from school. I went through that very evangelical stage in my head and felt I really should be sharing this stuff. But wisdom said, keep your mouth closed. And I realised after quite a while, I think it's something that Barb said a while ago, it's just about being sat there quietly with them. You are sharing the principles, that love and understanding. And I didn't realise I was doing it because the response was tremendous. Just seeing where they're coming from, understanding states of mind and just being with them. And I found that so valuable. And to hear that reinforced time and time again in this series is really good.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to moving on career-wise at the moment as well. And to work with kids in a school. So again, that's what I want to bring in there. And as you say, to be a teacher in a school, that's where we can have the most influence. Because I felt so far working individually, like out in just one-to-one in the community, I'm not seeing enough people. But one thing I do like about this series is the idea of us as teachers being in schools and just gently being and letting that love spread and that understanding and people to catch it, and to be able to offer the kids this tremendous understanding, but in a very gentle way, without having to teach or preach, just by living it.
Yeah.
So thank you for reinforcing all that. Really do appreciate it.
It's wonderful we can reinforce this for each other, and of course the results speak loudly. So it's fabulous.
It occurred to me that it might be of interest to people at this point, if you would, and we might invite Barb to join this part of the conversation. You have created, just literally as an act of giving back, a free online guided curriculum for teachers or others who are interested in education. And Barb, if it's all right, I will unmute you too. And perhaps the two of you could just chat about that. And we all agreed from the beginning, no one is, trying to promote or push any services. But as a facilitator, on the other hand, I want to make sure that you're aware of some of the resources that are freely available to you. So perhaps the two of you could talk about that, Barb and Christa.
You're so tanned and lovely. First
breathing.
Yes. Welcome home.
Thank you. Christa and I, in our conversations just over coffee over the last few months, have talked about wanting to give back for all that we've been given so generously over the years by Sid and all of the other people that we've learned from. And as we head into our retirement years, we thought we can give back by perhaps providing a video series. So that's something that we've started out to do. And we've made a series of 4 videos that can be used, and they're tied to Sid's videos. We do a little introduction of 10 or 11 minutes, and then we suggest one of Sid's videos to follow up. And it's on our websites and freely available for people to use in schools, to use in your own home, to use in whatever way you want. But it's our pay it forward, and we're hoping to do another series as well in the next while.
Yeah, we found in trying to create a workshop or professional development seminar that there's really no good day that works for everyone. All the school calendars are all different, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is it's difficult for people to move around geographically. It's very expensive. So we were in, Barb had this idea of doing something that would be available to anyone, anywhere. And it was really a joy to do that. And so we're really pleased to offer that to teachers, as Barb says, for anyone to use anywhere in a group, in a staff room, or, at home in your own comfort of your own living room. And I love that 3 Principles Global Community has the Long Beach lectures online. And so we've made a quick and easy link to Sid's lectures there. So it's really complete and free and available for people to enjoy.
In a couple of my sites, I should say in a couple of sites that I have assisted in the past, that's probably a better way to say it, that is one resource that is relatively easy for people who have learned the principles and want to keep going forward, but do not have, for example, a grant to be able to, finance training and so on. And as I understand, that's accessible from both of their websites. If you go back to the information page on Supermind, the link will be there. I am moved to John Countryman, if I could call on you.
Good.
I have just unmuted you, John, and I'm excited that you have joined the webinar series. and that you have posted what were to me some intriguing and inspiring goals and visions. Might you give us a response to Christa's presentation or others' comments today?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks for asking. And I apologize for being a little tardy. We're in the midst of final exams, and our schedule is all discombobulated from normal. But I'm really enjoying this. What stands out for me, both with Christa and Barb's presentations in the two sessions that I've visited and participated in, is the individual care and loving for the individual student, and the fact that so much investment is made in the student as an individual. You're talking about the whole student, and what really inspires me is hearing the stories that both of these fabulous teachers have to share with us about these individual students, which they remember from many years ago, who made such an impression on them. And it occurred to me too, as they were talking, that to think about story in a little bit different way, how you don't need to get into a dry explanation of the principles for them to have an impact on these young people. You can use story itself with them. I mean, even from your own personal lives or something that's happened in the classroom that you can use. It seems that illustration and demonstration has as much or more power to transform these students as teaching it. You were talking about words. The words would probably in some cases just get in the way, but you can tell stories to these young people, and through metaphor or through story imagery. We all love stories, but kids really love stories.
Yes.
And if the stories have some direct resonance with them, and they can pull the impact of the story out, and you can see this transformation take place. My wife was a middle grades language arts teacher, but she's now a director of a pre-K center. And she comes home every night with stories of individuals that she's working with, that she's in contact with every day. And the way she talks about them, one of the things that stuck with me today was Christa talking about, the in loco parentis, and how you get as attached to these students as you do to your own kids. That seems to be happening to Ruthie, who's my wife. That seems to be happening so much. She'll come home with a story every day, and she'll talk about these children as though they are her precious children of her own. And usually she talks about celebrations. She doesn't talk about the moments where they're frustrating or they're acting out or whatever it is. It's fantastic. I will tell you that I've been around the principals for a while. Talked just very casually a few times with Ruthie about them, and so she certainly in no way has immersed herself in them or studied them or anything like that. But I can see a change in her, and I'm sure that she brings some of that understanding to what she's doing in her settings. So it's been lovely. I think this is a great series, and this will be a tremendous resource when I guess it's Rudy is gonna post them on his site down the line for other people to profit from. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Brett Chitty will be posting these. They are up as we complete, in fact. And I thank you, John. Christa, we have just probably 2 or 3 minutes, so we'll turn it back over to you. And just invite, you've listened to participants. What's happened to you?
I love what John was just sharing about how you share a story that has some importance or a metaphor. Our young people, they're just trying to figure it out, and they will incorporate that into their philosophy of life. It's very natural. It's very beautiful. And if I remember right, there's a theater in the background, and that's a fabulous area of learning for people that can really find themselves playing other characters. So I just think it's wonderful that reading the bios on the forum. I mean, we got it going on around the world, but it's in a very quiet way. But I'm just so thrilled that it's happening. And as John was saying, his wife hasn't studied the principles. That doesn't mean that she's not having the same results as someone who has. It's about being human. And it doesn't take any money or time or any special grants or anything. And we can really connect with a student any day, anywhere, anytime, and see them with empathy. And on my clock, I see we're a little bit over, but I just want to, I'd be remiss if I didn't say how much Sid appreciated the work of teachers, how much he valued education, and also as a human being, how really inclusive he was. I mean, he loved his grandchildren, and there were a number of us family friends, our children would call him Uncle Sid, or children or youth in the community. He was so inclusive and interested in them, and so loving. And being as it's December, I'll have to add that he was the best Secret Santa I have ever met. And I do have a final quote, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll have to say, I have a whole topic on special education that we didn't touch on. So I'll just tell my husband. So this is from the Washington Lectures, Sydney Banks. I think that we are some of the luckiest people in the world. It is like a renaissance of the mind has started, and we are part of it. And I honestly believe that someday psychology and psychiatry will be rewritten, but by the youth. If you and I can get together to help the youth, help them in one way or another, if you can help them see the simplicity of life, if you can help them see they have this beauty inside them, and to see that they have this power within them, the youth will grow up very, very wise. This world will change and become a far, far better place to live in. Agree.